What's up YouTube? Eric Vasquez here from Teach Me to Design. In today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different because I'm going to be using a piece of AI software to help me come up with ideas for a custom logo design for a coffee shop. Now, we'll be using a piece of software called GPT-4 to help me generate some ideas, some names, and basically to act as my client to help me develop these logos. So let's see if GPT-4 can help us out as we design this logo. Let's get into it. All right, so today we're going to be doing something pretty fun, and we're going to be using GPT-4 to help us create an original logo for a coffee shop. Now, if you haven't heard about GPT-4, it's a great alternative to ChatGPT, and it doesn't crash nearly as much. I've heard a lot of people saying that, ChatGPT, while it's a great tool, can also sort of crash if a lot of people are using the server. So I decided to give this one a try, and I've been having some fun with it. So to start things off, I should just mention that you do have to sign up for an account. You just put in an email, create a password. It doesn't cost anything, but you can always upgrade to a Plus account if you want to. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I've just created a free account so that I can kind of demonstrate how this works and how we can use it in a creative way in our design process and workflow. Okay, so the first thing I want to do here is just come down to this search bar and let's go ahead and give it like a prompt. Okay, so what I want to do is use this tool to help us come up with some creative names. So let's think of a way we can sort of phrase this. Give me a list of 15 creative names for a coffee shop that combine different words in an interesting way. All right, and then let's just go ahead and enter that and see what happens. Now, you can ask this a lot of different things, and it will help you generate a lot of ideas very quickly. Some of them are going to be a bit moot, maybe not the best ideas in the world, but sometimes you'll get some pretty interesting results here. So you can see it's pretty fast actually at generating these names, and I've asked it to give me a list of 15 creative names for a coffee shop that combine different words in an interesting way. All right, so here you can see we've got a few even telling us what words they're combining, right? So number one, caffeinity, combining coffee and affinity to suggest a strong connection to the beverage. Love it. Bean voyage, that's kind of clever. A playful combination of coffee bean and voyage to evoke a sense of adventure. And you can see a few others here. Let's kind of scan through them and see which ones we like. Brewtopia is kind of interesting. Cup of joy, mocha loco, Javalicious, roast and toast, perk up, buzzed beans, morning fix, caffeine buzz, espresso yourself, that's cheesy, sip and chill, brew crew, and coffee cozy. All right, so there's a couple here that I'm kind of digging. I think caffeinity is pretty cool. Brewtopia is not bad. What else? Javalicious, roast and toast, perk up, and yeah, I think those are the ones I'm liking. So we've got one, caffeinity. That one's pretty good. Brewtopia is pretty good. Javalicious and perk up. So what I'm going to do is maybe take a few of these names here, and I'm just going to copy and paste a few of the ones that I like. Paste them into a text doc over here. All right. Let's narrow it down a little bit, maybe like something like that, right? So we've got about 5 names that I'm kind of digging right now. And what I want to do is maybe just take the first one and ask it to help me generate some more ideas here. So now let's take the first one, and I will ask it to maybe help me maybe describe some ideas to me, right? What could some of these logos look like? Give me a list of 10 descriptions for what a caffeinity logo could look like based on the description. And pretty quickly, it actually helps me come up with some ideas. Now, I'm a big fan of, thumbnail sketching and sketching ideas out, But I mean, if you're in a pinch and you wanted to just take these descriptions and jump right into Adobe Illustrator, some of these could actually give you a pretty decent jumping off point. So let's just take a look at some of these descriptions here. A stylized image of a coffee cup with the word Caffeinity written inside the cup, suggesting a strong connection to coffee. I don't know. A series of curved lines that come together to form the word Caffeinity, evoking the swirling motion of coffee being poured into a cup. That's kind of an interesting one. Another idea here is a logo that features a heart-shaped coffee bean with the word Caffeinity written next to it, suggesting a love for coffee. So that combines the affinity and the caffeine. I say what they did there. That one's actually kind of interesting, maybe taking a coffee bean or two and creating a heart shape with it. We could also do a simple modern logo that features the word Caffeinity in bold sans serif letters with a coffee bean silhouette incorporated into the letter C. Now I like that idea too, because that could kind of be playing with the negative space a little bit inside of the C. Now I also like number 9, a logo that features the word Caffeinity in a whimsical font with steam rising from the letters, suggesting the warmth and comfort of a good cup of coffee. So what I'm going to do now is I have my text document, right? So I'm going to maybe take 2 of these ideas that I'm kind of liking, and I will put them next to the name here. So if I go back to my text document, Caffeinity, let's just say idea 1 and idea 2. All right, and that was maybe the heart shape, something with the heart shape showing the love for coffee. All right, and then I also said number 9, I think. So let's take those 3 concepts, okay, and that will all be part of our first kind of name up here. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of those highlights around the boxes that I don't really want. Oops. There we go. And let's try it with one more name here. I kind of like maybe either Javalicious or Perk Up. All right, so let's try the same prompt, but we'll change it to Perk Up. All right, so I'm going to copy my previous prompt, and instead of Caffeinity logo, let's do Perk Up logo. All right, so give me a list of 10 descriptions for what a Perk Up logo could look like based on the description. And let's see what comes back. All right, and then we've got our list here of 10 sort of descriptions for what that logo could look like. Now, at first glance, I'm looking at some of these, cartoon character with a coffee cup in their hand. That's kind of interesting. Or what else? A logo that features the word Perk Up in a whimsical font. I think that's actually similar to one of the other ideas it gave us before. A logo that features the word Perk Up in bold, italicized letters with a coffee bean silhouette incorporated into the letter K. Okay, and maybe let's try one more here. I'm going to try the same prompt again, but maybe with Javalicious and see if it gives me any other ideas here. All right, let's go ahead and try that. Okay, so looking at this list, I can see that there's a few that are kind of similar to the results that I got with my previous 2 prompts here. But there's a couple that are kind of interesting. There's a lot of ideas here with, a coffee cup silhouette or a bean being connected to one of the letters, something with a cartoon character, perhaps. Coffee bean with a halo around it. That one's a little cheesy, I think. Maybe something where, what's this one? A logo that features an image of a coffee bean with wings, suggesting a sense of energy and excitement after drinking a cup of Javalicious coffee. Now, when I first heard the name Perk Up, I was actually kind of thinking about like lightning bolts or something like that. Like when you're caffeinated, you get that zap in the morning of coffee. So I still like the name Perk Up, but I might try something with that idea. So what I'm going to do is take this second prompt that I did, and I'm going to change this up a little bit. So I'm going to say, give me a list of 10 descriptions for what a Perk Up logo could look like using a lightning bolt and coffee cup or a coffee bean. Let's just see what happens. All right, I want it to come up with something different, right? I don't want two similar results here, right? So I'm looking for some ideas. And in this way, I'm sort of incorporating an original thought of my own, right? And asking it to play off of that, build off of that idea, and give me something else. And it's actually, giving me some different results now because I've injected that, one or two words just to help it along. So let's check out some of these results. A bold and energetic logo that features a lightning bolt and a coffee cup silhouette with the word perk up written in bold letters to suggest an energizing and revitalizing coffee experience. Number 5 is a logo that features an image of a coffee bean with a lightning bolt coming out of it with the word perk up written above or below the image to suggest an energizing and revitalizing coffee experience. Number 6 is also kind of interesting. A logo that features an image of a lightning bolt in the shape of a coffee cup with the word perk up written in bold letters above or below the image to suggest an energizing and revitalizing coffee experience. I actually like that one, so I'm going to take that, add it to my Word document here. Not my Word document, my text file here. All right. I don't want this to be a list. I'm just going to clean that up. But what I'm looking for here is just a couple of ideas for each of these names. Cool. All right, and let's go ahead and take a look at some of these other ones just to see if there's anything else here that we can use. All right, so we now basically have 2 different names here for our coffee shop that this has helped us generate, and we also have a couple of descriptions for what these could look like. So that's kind of interesting. And they don't have to be, exact, right? Like this can be a jumping off point for us, which is kind of what I'm hoping for. So I'm just pulling up my text doc here and looking at these 2 names, right? So the first one is Caffinity, combining coffee and affinity to suggest a strong connection to the beverage. And we've got 3 sort of concepts here. And then we have our second one, Perk Up, which we have 2 concepts for. All right, so maybe let's take our first idea out for Caffinity, and we'll just go with these 2. All right, and then what I want to do is maybe ask this to give me a couple of ideas for typefaces that we could potentially use here. Create a list of 10 free typefaces and include links. Let's see here. Create a list of 10 free typefaces that would work well for a coffee shop logo design and include links. Let's do that. And let's see what it gives us here for font recommendations, right? And I imagine that since we're asking it to provide us with 10 free typefaces, you'll notice that a lot of these are free Google fonts. And most of them are probably, somewhat straightforward, maybe not the most unique or memorable looking fonts, but I was just kind of curious what it would do. Right, and knowing that we have links here for these fonts, we can also click on each of these links and see what they look like. I happen to know that, Montserrat, Roboto, Oswald, Lato are all kind of, basic sans serif fonts. So if you want to, you can kind of use some of these. I have a few of these already, but there's a few that I haven't seen before. So let's take a look at what Playfair looks like. And that's just kind of a serif font, right? Not the most interesting font in the world. Abril is a pretty nice one. I think that's another serif. Yep. Let's take a look at Brie serif, see what that looks like. I like that it has a little bit more weight to it. It's almost like it's a chunky serif, almost like a slab kind of. So let's go ahead and download that family. Cool. And then we can also go ahead and check out this one, Cormorant Garamond. Nah, too basic. Pacifico, let's see what Pacifico looks like. That one's kind of fun. Maybe I'll use that too. That could work for a tagline perhaps. So let's download that family as well. And speaking of taglines, maybe let's go ahead and say, generate a list of 10 tagline ideas for a coffee shop called Caffinity. All right, let's get some taglines going here too. All right, and now we actually have some tagline ideas that we can use here. So I'm going to pick up this first one. Just drop this into my text document here. And it doesn't really matter. This is messy. I don't want to waste time formatting this text file here. All right, and let's see if there's another one we can pick up. I like sip into your happy place. That's kind of cool. 2. Right. And then let's just go ahead and do the same thing with our second name here for perk up. Okay, so I'll say generate a list of 10 tagline ideas for a coffee shop called Perk Up. And hopefully it'll give us some different results, but let's see. I'm kind of curious. Maybe get your daily perk at Perk Up, get your daily perk, something like that. Right, and the reason that I want to get a couple of tagline ideas here is because I want to be able to, incorporate another font. So we'll have one font for our main logo, and maybe that nice script font that we looked at before for a tagline. And let's try something like coffee that elevates your mood. All right, so we've got a couple ideas here now, and it's done a pretty good job of giving us some recommendations. So you can go ahead and start maybe downloading some of those free typefaces. If you're looking for something else, some other options here are to go to dafont.com, and you can maybe browse around here. Like there's some nice free typefaces you can use under the brush, the handwritten, or the calligraphy categories. If you want to find something with a little bit more sort of personality to it. All right, I like this one here called Yakin. That one's kind of nice. I'll also take a look at a few more here. Regular brush, that's cool. And let's just go through like another page or two. This is generally what I like to do anytime I'm creating logos, is I'll spend some time just looking for interesting and unique typefaces. Sometimes you can find some pretty good free ones on these kind of sites, but you do want to be mindful of the licenses and things like that. You'll probably have to license these if you were going to use it for a real project. All right, and then let's go ahead and take a look here just at the bottom. This one's kind of interesting too, the Romantica. All right, and if you are looking for other premium options, there's also websites like Envato where you can go and check out some of their typefaces as well. And what I like to do in here is maybe check off one of these categories such as decorative, and then you can find some really interesting fonts here. All right, so let's take a quick browse through here, and I might grab one or two of these as well. I kind of like Swashington, so I'm going to grab that one. Okay, and then let's see if we can find maybe one or two more to play around with here. I think Pathways is also kind of nice. Let's go ahead and try Glowist as well. That one's also kind of interesting looking. Okay, so the next thing you'll want to do is grab all of your typefaces and install them. All right, so I just use FontBook usually on my Mac here. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and install these fonts that I've downloaded. All right, so all of these look pretty good except for this one, Daughter of Fortune, which gave us an error. So I'm just going to scrap that one for now. But all the other fonts have been installed. So what I like to do next, just because I'm OCD and I like to keep things very organized, is I'm just going to set up a basic folder structure here for our logo project. All right, what I typically will do is I'll have one folder for resources, and this will include things like typefaces, elements, any sort of color references or anything like that that I have. So I can actually go and save my text file in there as well. All right, and I will call this GPT-4 concepts. All right, and then I'm going to set up another folder here that I just call production. And typically when I'm working, if there are going to be several rounds of revisions, if it's a client project, I like to start with, numbering the folders here. And then inside of there, I will create a folder for my Illustrator file, my EPS file, and a PDF folder as well, so that I can spit out a PDF from Illustrator to share with a client. Now, I'm just going to do a quick search here for some coffee-related images. Right, I'm just going to find like a coffee mug, so I can maybe just draw something like that, or I can even try like a mocha pot. I'm just getting ideas for coffee-related objects that I could maybe use here. All right, and just to get an idea of like the shapes that I can use, right? So what I would do is maybe trace one of these in Illustrator, right? So all I'm going to do is just take like a screen grab of any images that I think could be useful here. Just some different things that I can experiment with. So like that. Maybe the mug could be a good idea for us with some of our concepts. Right, so all I'm doing here is just grabbing some quick references. I'm not, going to be using these exact images in any of my logo designs here. But what I am going to do is take all of those screen grabs and throw them into my folder here that I've set up. All right, so I'll call this folder references, and then just go ahead and grab those screenshots and toss them in here. All right, so now it's time for us to jump over into Adobe Illustrator. Let's go ahead and set up a new document here, and I'm just going to create 4 artboards, 5 inches by 5 inches, in RGB color mode, and then click Create. Now what I'm going to do here is just open my folder again so I can see the typefaces that I downloaded, right, typefaces. And you'll see I have the whole list here, so I'm just going to scoot this over a bit. And I'm just going to start with the very basic name of the coffee shop, right? So I'll type out the word Caffinity, and I will type out the words perk up. Now using these, I will create, I'll kind of go through and try each of these typefaces out, right? So you have your basic ones that we looked at, like Envato, which are just nice, clean typefaces, right? Let's go ahead and scale those up a bit. Right, and just move this over here so you can see what we're doing. All right, I'll put this one here. And what I'd like to do now is just kind of create a copy of it, right? And then I'll go ahead and change the font to, you can take a look at Lato. That was one of the other ones. They're not bad, they work. But again, like I was saying, if you want something that has a little bit more personality to it, it's good to have a few options like that too. So I try to have a variety of options when I'm working on logos like this. If this were a real, client project, I would try to provide them with probably anywhere from 10 to 20 logo options, and then sort of have them narrow it down and revise them and things like that. Okay, and that's kind of the, in a real world kind of project, that's what I would do at least. All right, so we can take a look at Brie, serif regular, and that's a little bit more interesting already. All right, and I think Pacifico was one of the other free ones which we were going to use for the tagline. So I'll get to that in a minute. I just want to see what some of these other interesting looking fonts look like here. Right, and I'm just going down the list. Right, so I'm going to try. Is this one called main file? No, it's called Glowist. All right, so let's go Glowist. That one's pretty nice too. It's got kind of a vintage vibe to it. All right, and I'm just doing some type exploration here, okay? And I know that there's also some ornaments in here, which is kind of nice. So let me go ahead and open that up. And this gives us a couple of nice options if we wanted to try to incorporate something like this. There's a couple of little embellishments in here that could be nice. So while I'm at it, I'm just going to grab a few of these. Maybe just to play around with and use some of these with our coffee bean or a lightning bolt, depending on what kind of assets we do. Right, and all I'm going to do is scale these down for now and just keep them all on one of these artboards that I've made. I'm going to delete that little flower there and just keep the wavy line. All right, and then let's keep going and looking at a few more of these fonts here. We have Pathways, Hochstad. Pathways, let's try that. The italicized or oblique kind of look can work well for perk up, I think, because that sort of evokes some motion and has some energy to it, which I think, is part of the idea with perk up and the lightning bolt. So that's kind of interesting. But let's take a look at the last few just to see if there's anything else here. And you'll see with some of these fonts, you actually have various styles or weights, right? So I've got 2 or 3 different kind of styles here that I can check out and play around with. And I think the script ones will work particularly well for our taglines. All right, so just drop these over here for now. So I'm looking for our main font and then a font that we will use for our tagline. All right, Swashington was the next one. That was kind of interesting too. That could work well for Caffeinity here. And another thing I wanted to point out is sometimes you get these nice sort of glyphs or alternate characters that you can use, which are pretty cool. You know, you don't need to use them all the time, but if you want to just add a little bit of that extra sort of flair to a design, you can kind of get a few different options here to play around with. All right, so maybe if like the Y on the end has a little tail, I think I'll play around with that one a little bit more. All right, and then let's take a look at our last couple of typefaces here, the Romantica and Yakin. All right, so again, because that's a script one, I'm going to save that maybe for our tagline. All right, get rid of that. And let's see what our last one is here. Yakin. That one's got some energy to it as well. I don't know why it's mixing all these things together, but I'll just retype that. Cool. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go full screen again here and just kind of take a look at some of these typefaces. Now, there's a few that I think are kind of boring, so I'm going to get rid of those initial fonts here. All right, that one might work better for Caffeinity. It's a little more serious. Maybe the brush. Glowist is okay, but I don't think it's right for this. So all I'm going to do here is kind of like eliminate a few of these. Right, like these are kind of my favorite ones, I think, for Caffeinity. And for Perk Up, I'm kind of digging these. Okay, but now let's go ahead and add our tagline and kind of mix these fonts together. So I'll kind of look for some font combinations here. Okay, that can work pretty nicely. And let's see, our taglines for Caffeinity are fuel your affinity for coffee with Caffeinity. So I'm just going to maybe shorten that a little bit. Let's see how it looks. I'll grab my Pathways font here, make it a little smaller. And let's see how it looks in our other styles. Yeah, it's a little bit too long. I think that in that case, it's a little bit too long for a tagline. Maybe just fuel your affinity with Caffeinity. That's kind of cool. All right, and then we can also try, what was our other tagline here? Sip into your happy place. I like that one too. All right, so all I'm doing here is just seeing how these taglines look. Right, in these different fonts here. All right, and then we can kind of mix these together. Maybe try it in all caps. All right, we also had this font over here that we can try. That one's also a little bit tough to read at a smaller size. So maybe what I'll do is swap these around. So I can also try to use this more unique kind of brushy script here for the main font. And then what I'll do is sample one of these other fonts for our tagline. Right, something like that. Simple, clean, easy to read tagline. Especially once you have more words, you will probably want to use a more easy to read typeface. All right, and then we can maybe take a look at another sort of alternative here, right? Let's play around with this font a little bit and see if we can maybe change up a few of the characters. Create something a little bit more unique looking here for ourselves. Right, and that's pretty interesting too. So what I'm going to do is I just changed one of the F's, and I'm just going to add a little bit of spacing here between the letters, just playing with the kerning manually. And all I'm doing is moving my cursor between the letters I want to adjust, and then holding the Alt Option key and using the arrows to either move the letters closer together or further apart. All right, so that gives us a little bit more of a custom look. And I'm going to use the same typeface here, but maybe I'll change this one back to one of our free ones, Envato. Maybe in like a medium weight. That looks pretty good. And I'm just going to maybe position this, sort of nest it somewhere here inside of the logo, just so it feels a little more connected. Could try to break it into 2 lines, maybe make it a little bit smaller. Or we can, go back to our regular F here, just so that we have a little more space, right? You can also do that. I'm just looking for a nice place for this tagline to sit. Right, and the last thing I'm going to do here is just separate the C from the rest of the logo. Okay, because I want to maybe make it a little bit larger. And then let's see. Something like that's kind of nice. And I could try to put this maybe above the logo here instead. Go back to all caps, maybe space the letters out. Make it a bit smaller. And just get rid of the period on the end there. Okay, so we kind of have like 2 sort of lockups here for Caffeinity that are interesting, right? And they both feel pretty different from each other, so I like that. I'm just going to scale this tagline down here for the second one. And let's go ahead and do the same thing for Perk Up, so we can kind of play around with that one a little bit too. What was our tagline for Perk Up here? Get your daily perk at Perk Up, or coffee that elevates your mood at Perk Up. Right, and I can see this one working maybe like with a nice like lightning bolt and coffee bean incorporated into it. Let's try that out. Right, we could also play around with, how we want to modify these a little bit, maybe change them up to make them a little bit different. So for example, I'll go with like a heavier weight here, maybe black. And you could even do italic so that it kind of follows the same motion that we have going, that kind of skewed look there. Okay, and we've now taken a look at some interesting ways that we can just create some basic lockups here for each of these 2 names. Now, I realize we're using the same fonts here for these 2 bottom options, but the first options are both pretty unique looking. So the next thing I want to do is get a few sort of like graphic elements, right? So I'm going to just quickly trace some of those screen grabs and images that I pulled down earlier, just so I have another element to work with here as well. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and create my next sort of asset here with this coffee cup, but I'm just going to make a copy of it by clicking and dragging while holding the Alt, Option, and Shift keys. And let's try the image trace again, because this one actually has a little more contrast, so it might work. And all I'm going to do here is just play around with the threshold slider a little bit, and I've got my mode set to black and white, and I actually kind of like the way that it's rendering the lid. That gives us a nice sort of graphic style with some built-in highlights, as opposed to our mug where we'd have to add them manually. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go to Object, Image Trace, Expand, and then just remove any of those extra points. Now, the reason why I made a copy is because I figured if I only use the lid, at least I still have another copy that I can trace over here for the rest of the cup. Okay, so what I can do now is send that to the back, lock it, and just trace the basic shape of the cup itself. Right, now we've got a pretty nice looking coffee cup that we can also play with. We can get rid of our reference image. And then lastly, let's do a quick illustration of one of these mocha pots here, just to have another kind of graphic element to play around with. So as much as I love the classic Bialetti mocha pot, it's going to have to go for right now because I like the height of this one a little bit more. And again, I can try the image trace, see what that does for us here. And really what we're looking to do is just simplify this shape, right? We just want to break it down into simple forms because, you know, I think when it comes to logo design, simple is better because you want to make sure that everything reads nicely at various sizes, especially small sizes. All right, so looks like this one we're going to be doing manually, but I think I can do it pretty quickly. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and lock this and begin tracing this shape. Cool. All right. So now we've got a mocha pot, a coffee cup, and a mug that we can play around with. And, you know, just looking at these, I feel like we have some nice options in here. I think the last little thing that I would want to create is a coffee bean and maybe like a lightning bolt for per cup. So let's go ahead and get rid of the mug. I don't think that's as interesting as these two. So I'm just kind of editing as I go. Cool. All right, so we've now got a couple of options here, and we can just kind of take a look at this, make sure you save all of your work once again, and I'm just going to close a few of these panels for a second. And what I like to do is kind of grab all of my text on my artboards, create a new layer for them, paste them, and call it type, lockups. And then I'll have another sort of layer for all of the graphic elements or assets. So let's call these design elements. And now I'm just going to open up my artboards and rearrange the space a little bit. I'm going to add 2 more artboards. Okay, and what I'd like to do is maybe have 2 rows of 3. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select all these, click on this little box down here that says rearrange artboards, and I want to have 3 columns. Okay, cool. So we now have our type, and we have our design elements. And now we can use these bottom ones to start playing around with, you know, combining these things together to create a finished looking logo. So I'm going to start off by grabbing this first copy of the Caffeinity type up here. And let's also go ahead and grab our coffee bean. We'll grab a coffee bean, paste it over here. And we can maybe grab some of these little decorative elements because that kind of works with this whole vibe we've got going on. And let's start to play around with a few of these things here. Maybe I can flip that. And again, I'm kind of using the idea here. Maybe I can add some of these lines to imply steam, right? Maybe steam coming off of the logo. Just like we had GPT-4 help us with, right? Just an idea. It may or may not work. But this is kind of where the experimentation comes into play. Right, and if I want to, I can actually maybe redraw some of these. Just so I have a little bit more control. All right, so what I'll do is create a line here, and I'll open up my stroke panel. And I want to round the ends of that line. And then I want to use the width tool to make that a little bit wider there. Right, so that I like a little bit more. It's a little bit thicker, kind of looks a little bit closer to the thickness of the font here. Add a little bit of stroke to that just to fill in some of the gaps there. And I don't know if I need that there, actually. I'm just going to remove that for a second. Maybe try this one instead. You know, now that I'm looking at this, I kind of feel like we could do something interesting with the 2 dots on the eye. Maybe if I flip this, could almost maybe make it look like more of a smiley face, right? Since we're saying sip into your happy place, that might be kind of an interesting idea. So let's go ahead and create a straight line here. Not a straight line, but create 2 points. And then just create a little curve, right? Maybe increase the thickness a bit, make the ends rounded like we did before. And now we've got like a little kind of hidden message in here, right? It kind of looks like a smiley face. I'll keep that for now. It's kind of interesting. And then let's just see if maybe we can add anything else to this if we need to. Again, what I can do is use the width tool to maybe make the middle of the smile a little bit thicker, like that. Right, and then I'll just duplicate a few of these steam lines here. And now that I'm seeing the steam lines, I don't think we need it anymore because we have that little smile in here, and that's kind of a cute little touch. And you know, it's things like that that you kind of discover while you're playing around. So I'm just going to refine the tagline a little bit more. Maybe find a little way to just incorporate a coffee bean or 2. Could be inside of the C here, you know, but I actually don't think we need it. You know, sometimes less is more, right? So here we have our first logo, Caffeinity. So what I'm going to do is select all of this together, cut it, put it on a new layer, and I'll call it Logo 1. Okay, and then what I'd like to do is go to the Object menu and choose Expand, make sure Object and Fill are checked off, and click OK. And now we've got that set up as one solid shape. Okay, so that way we can move the whole thing around as a unit. And we have our first logo, which looks pretty cool. All right, so now let's quickly come up with our second logo here using some of these other elements that we have. So I'll grab the cup and the mocha pot, just copy it onto my next artboard here. And I'm going to grab this perk up text, copy it down here to the bottom, maybe grab my lightning bolt that I can use here. And I think there was an idea in our text document that sort of described one of these logos, right? A logo that features an image of a lightning bolt in the shape of a coffee cup with the word perk up written in bold letters, or a logo that features a stylized image of a coffee bean with a lightning bolt incorporated into the design. So now that I'm thinking about this, why don't I take this coffee bean and maybe see what it looks like if the lightning bolt is kind of going through it. All right, so if I make it upright, I can make a copy of this lightning bolt, make it white, put it on top of the coffee bean, just make it thinner, shrink it down a little bit. You know, something like that, that could be kind of nice, right? So that's one option. But we could also do something where maybe the coffee cup is turning into the lightning bolt. All right, so what I can do is turn that a little bit, try to match the points of the lightning bolt up with the coffee cup here. All right, but what we're going to have to do is maybe make this coffee cup black so that it kind of blends into the lightning bolt more. So let's just see what that looks like. Again, I'm just experimenting. I have no idea if this is going to look good or not, so don't hold me to it. All right, I'm going to get rid of the sleeve here. Yeah, not really feeling that. It's not quite working the way I had thought it would. But I'll grab another copy of the lightning bolt and try something else. maybe the lightning bolt can be on the coffee cup or on the sleeve here. Like that. That could be kind of interesting. Okay. And that's kind of a nice look too. Right, so we've got the bean with the lightning bolt going through it. We've got the cup with the lightning bolt on it. We still have the mocha pot. The mocha pot's pretty cool looking, so I'm wondering if maybe I can use that in my first logo somehow. You know, maybe we may not end up using this, which would be kind of a shame because it is kind of cool looking, but perhaps we'd find a way to incorporate it into our branding some other way. All right, but for now, I just want to focus on getting this logo down. All right, so what I'm going to do is maybe get rid of the mocha pot for now, and let's see if we can kind of work our type around the cup here. All right, so we'll grab that, group it together, make it bigger, grab our text here, make a little bit less space there. All right, it could be something as simple as that. Let's hold on to that as well. So we've got our regular coffee cup, we've got the one with the lightning in it. All right, and then I'll go ahead and cut this one, paste it here and say logo 2. Okay, so we've now created 2 different coffee logos here, which we've generated using the power of GPT-4. And it helped us come up with ideas not only for the coffee shop itself, but for taglines, for sort of descriptions on how it could look. And then we've explored fonts to start to put our logos together, and also how we can pull together some assets to play around with. So using these assets, we've come up with 2 pretty cool looking logos here. The first one for Caffeinity, sip into your happy place, with the nice little hidden happy face here between the 2 eyes. And the next one is Perk Up, where we've taken a nice sort of bold and italic typeface, kept the motion going through our tagline, coffee that elevates your mood, and we've sort of incorporated a lightning bolt here into the coffee bean. Okay, and then I'm just kind of using that as a very simple graphic element here on the logo. So I think between these 2, I feel like Caffeinity is probably a little bit stronger, has more of the vintage kind of vibe that I was going for. But you can see how I go through my logo design process and how I create different variations, how I explore fonts, how I pull all these things together, and did it with the help of an AI tool. So keep in mind, you know, the AI tool didn't do the work for me, but it certainly helped me generate some ideas. So this is the type of way that I would encourage you to play around with a tool like GPT-4 to come up with some cool ideas for logos of your own. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching and for following along. If you did enjoy the video, please go ahead and smash that like button, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so you never miss a video. This is Eric Vasquez here for Teach Me to Design, and we'll see you next time.